All right, welcome. Today we're going to dive into one of the biggest, most controversial puzzles in all of psychoanalysis, something Sigmund Freud laid out in his book, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. We are going to unravel this thing together.
So let's just jump right into the central mystery, okay? This is the big question. Why do we so often repeat things that cause us pain? This is the very thing that stumped Freud himself and sent him down a path that would completely change his theories about the human mind.
Now, to really get why this was such a big deal for Freud, we first have to understand the rule that he thought governed pretty much everything, the simple, elegant law that he believed was running the whole show in our minds.
So initially, Freud's model was, pretty straightforward. He basically argued that our minds operate on this one core motivation: seek pleasure and avoid pain. And he wasn't really talking about happiness exactly. It's more about reducing the tension from our inner drives. The mind just wants to get back to a state of calm. Simple enough, right?
But of course, we all live in the real world. You can't just satisfy every single impulse the second it pops up. That would be chaos. So the mind gets clever. It develops what Freud called the reality principle. This is what helps us navigate the world, delay gratification, and find smarter, safer ways to eventually get what we want. And this is the key thing. The reality principle isn't fighting against pleasure. Not at all. Think of it more like a clever strategist or a bodyguard for the pleasure principle. It's the part that says, hey, I want that too, but let's make a plan so we can actually get it without everything blowing up in our face.
But Freud, being Freud, was an incredibly sharp observer, and he started to see some cracks in this neat little theory. He noticed behaviors in his patients, and even just in everyday life, that simply did not fit this model of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain.
He actually described this force he was seeing as demonic. I mean, that's a strong word, right? It was this irresistible compulsion to repeat things that seemed to offer no reward, no pleasure, and in fact, usually brought a whole lot of pain. It felt like it was coming from somewhere else, somewhere darker.
And the evidence was popping up everywhere. You had soldiers suffering from war neurosis, what we'd now call PTSD, reliving horrific battlefield scenes in their nightmares. You had patients in his office replaying painful family dramas with him, their therapist. He even saw it in the way kids play. It was all pointing to the same, very unsettling conclusion.
And this was the fundamental contradiction, the big, flashing question that just wouldn't go away. If the entire point of our mental machinery is to keep us safe and avoid discomfort, why on earth would it force us to watch reruns of our most painful moments? This is what pushed Freud to look for an answer that went beyond his own pleasure principle.
Now, faced with all this conflicting evidence, Freud didn't just try to patch up his old theory. Nope. He proposed something brand new, something truly shocking, and an idea that is still one of his most controversial to this day.
He had to admit it. The pleasure principle, as elegant as it was, just wasn't the whole story. It couldn't be. There had to be something else at work, something deeper.
And here it is, the radical hypothesis, the death drive. Freud suggested that there's another fundamental instinct in us, one that's not pushing towards life, growth, and making connections, but one that's pulling us back toward the absolute quiet of non-existence, a return to the inorganic state that existed before life ever began.
And this quote just nails the concept. Now, this isn't some simple wish to die. It's a much bigger, almost philosophical idea. It's that all living things have this deep, built-in drive to return to a state of zero stimulation, zero struggle, zero tension, the total peace of the inorganic world. So Freud's new picture of the mind is this kind of epic battlefield. In one corner, you've got Eros, the life instincts. They're all about building things up, creating, connecting, preserving life. And in the other corner, you have Thanatos, the death instincts, silently working to break things down, dissolve connections, and get back to that state of pure inertia.
And this is so important to understand. Thanatos isn't necessarily about self-destruction or aggression, even though it can look like that sometimes. At its absolute core, it's a deep underlying pull towards what one writer called the stillness of a stone. It's the ultimate desire to eliminate all tension.
So how do we think about this wild idea today? Well, later thinkers, most famously the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, took Freud's kind of biological speculation and gave it a huge makeover. He turned it into a theory about language.
For Lacan, this compulsion to repeat isn't some biological urge to return to dust. No way. He saw it as a feature of our unconscious, which he argued is structured just like a language. So for him, the repetition isn't of an event, but of the very words and symbols that first define that event for us.
So in this newer view, what we're forced to repeat isn't the raw trauma itself, but the symbolic patterns, the signifying chains that make up our unconscious mind. It's almost like our unconscious has a script, a story it tells about us, and it just keeps insisting on replaying that script, whether it's a happy one or a painful one.
And so, this whole radical idea from Freud leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Is there maybe a fundamental pain of being that just comes with the tension of being alive? And if so, could this so-called death drive actually be the ultimate expression of our deepest desire, to finally, truly be free from it?